Well, good evening. Welcome to another episode of the Mechanator channel. As always, keep the shiny side up. Excuse my voice for having a little bit of a rasp. I'm fighting off walking pneumonia, but I figured I'd update this video in the hopes of preventing people from doing the no-nos. So don't do this and don't do that. I've had a couple repairs where people have lubricated this front bearing section. There's no bearings in there that can need to be lubricated. All you're going to do is get grease or oil on the brake shoes, which causes a lack of friction, which makes the brakes almost impossible to adjust. You just adjust it with this 14mm nut, which is attached with the brake cable to the brake arm. Then when you push on it or pull on it, it actually pushes the shoes out against the drum. If you put lubrication in here because it's making noise, there must be something stuck in your wheel, or you bent the axle, or you push the bearings and by hitting this axle nut so hard that you pop the bearings out of alignment, causing this hub part to rub against this part. Obviously, if there's a funny noise coming out of the front, stop riding it and get it serviced. Don't lubricate the front or the rear. Bearing section. On inside that, all the parts are sealed. They're tool bearings. They do not need any kind of lubrication whatsoever. If they do seize up, well, then you've obviously done something really catastrophic to the bearings anyway. You need to replace them. They're about $5 each. And they got standard part markings on them for any auto parts store. The harness. We discovered a few anomalies with the wiring harnesses over the years. The manufacturers had pins come out loose on the back of the connectors. The pins are retractable if you poke through them with a very small flat-bladed screwdriver, and I'm talking like 000 size. And you can extract the pins, straighten them out, rebuild the tang, and push it back in and lock it in. And that's why I usually use hot glue or RTV to keep the pins in there. And once they're plugged together, then provide a weather-tight seal. But just for your information, I'll go over the wire harness again. This 6-pin connector is for the display on the 2014 bikes. And if you've had a bike shipped to you, then you more likely are going to have to change the front display to get the correct speedometer reading. This is the one you plug it into. Obviously, it's already plugged in on some assembled models, but you don't have to worry about that. This 4-pin connector here, it's got a key, a slot in the side of it, so you can't plug it in backwards. It's got a locking tab on the top right here. If I can hold it correctly. They all have locking tabs on them. If by chance you need to separate these, they sometimes will glue and get stiff over a period of time. It makes it almost impossible to get apart, so you may have to snip them with a pair of side cutters and then hot glue them when you put them back together. The throttle connects to this 3-pin connector right here. There just happens to be an extra one. Either one of these blue wires connectors are actually going to work the throttle the same way, and it's black red, blue black, blue yellow. There's the throttle connector. On the 2012 models, the wiring order is backwards. Don't ask me why. It's the same on the 2013s and the 2014s. And as for orientation, there's a locking tab on top. The 1, 2, 3 selector switch over here on handlebars. This bike will actually run without a 1, 2, 3 switch. If you broke yours or had a catastrophic boo-boo, you can actually run without the 1, 2, 3 switch. The default setting is number 2, which is 25 miles an hour. But there's the wiring for that, and it's color-coded as yellow with white stripe, black with a white stripe, green with a white stripe. And you'll discover there's an extra connector on your buzzer. Oh wait, yeah, here buzzer. It's yellow with a red stripe and a gray, and the wires ultimately end up at the throttle and turn signal switch. This particular bike also has a ignition switch. On the China Post, you'll find these. There's usually a red and a red-yellow wire. If you jumper these two, you can hot wire the bike. It's the same as turning on the key. On the BLW bikes, you won't find that. On the China Post, you will find that. Sometimes you'll have an extra connector that's 3-pin on the harness, and it doesn't do a damn thing. The brake harness, usually it's a red and a green wire on the China Post or the BLW. But on the 2014 Black Edition bike like this one, they got backed over by a car. Long story. There's your brake handle wires. They come from each brake handle sensor here and here. When you close your brake handle, it actually opens the circuit that's normally closed and connected. That tells the motor controller, hey, cut the electric power to the motor. All this wire harness comes down through the J-pipe, down to the back end of down towards the back end of the bike, and comes up out of the rear. It comes with the rear harness right there. Very similar on the JZ CGWs, BLWs, and China Post. I just removed the plastic to do a frame inspection on this bike. It may get rebuilt. It may just stay as a parts bike. This is a perfect example of what your typical wiring harness is. This is a 60-volt controller. So all the wires that were up there, obviously, are down here. Here's your 1, 2, 3 selector switch wires, the 3 wires there. They used a 4-pin connector. And it goes through and connects to the controller. This is the hot red and green wire combination to supply power and current to the instrument display and the throttle up front. It in turn is connected to yet another bus, which is connected to a fuse, which is in turn connected to, there's the fuse. It's an AGC 15 amp fuse, which is connected to a very large 3-prong spade connector. And one end has the cord that connects to your battery pack. And then these wires feed the power directly to the controller. The other wire that comes down off the harness is a supplemental ignition wire. When the ignition is turned on, this wire becomes hot. It's just a simple spade connector. The next bundle of wires that come down out of the harness is obviously the throttle. And the throttle wires are right there from the top of the harness. And these go directly into the controller right there. You'll notice that there's 3 extra sets of wires that are unplugged. And they have like little jumpers on the end of them. The white wires for training the controller to a new wheel or motor hub assembly. That is done at the factory. You don't have to worry about that. The orange wire is a nanny mode. It forces it to speed select setting number 1, and it just will not let you go any faster. It must be for Britain. The blue wire is for cruise control. Supposedly, if you hold your throttle for 8 to 10 seconds, it would just keep going, and you don't have to use the twist throttle to actually make the bike keep going. I do not like this because it's just an accident waiting to happen, so it's unplugged from the factory. If you want to turn on, help yourself. In the bike, there's actually a pedal X sensor. There's a magnet on the sprocket that it rotates and tells the computer how you're attempting to operate the bike by pedaling, and then of course it'll give you an electric assist. That wire eventually ends up in the controller. The main motor wire, this is what I really wanted to talk about in the video, is that they shipped these with rubber boots that were loose. You can see I taped these. But when you build your bike yourself, you want to double check that the rubber boots are covering the entirety of the connector, including the bullet connector that plugs into it from the motor itself. If these 3 wires are jammed together and there's any exposed conductors, you can obviously see that's potential for a short circuit. And this is why I'm making this video, is to alert people of this problem. I noticed the last couple of boxes that I was opening that these connectors were having exposed conductors. They need to be wrapped, taped, or hot glued. It is most important. Okay, the next wire that comes down from the wiring harness is part of the actual display. And it connects to this bundle of wires right here. This is the same connector from the top for the brake light, turn signal, headlights. And it connects to the rear tail light assembly that goes somewhere up there on the back of your bike. Ooh, well, look, missing seat bracket and everything else. Well, just take my word for it. That's the one that plugs in the rear. There's 5 conductors and a 6-pin connector. And there's the color codes for it. And I believe green is left, orange was right, blue is headlight for running light, and The dark blue is actually, I believe, hot. Anyway, the next bundle of wires that come out of the top that heads towards the display is this blue-white wire right here at the top of the harness. Blue with a white stripe. Connects to the green wire coming from the controller. And what that does is that feeds the tachometer signal from the Hall effect sensors on the wheel. Comes through the display cable here. It comes up through the cable and it connects to the Hall effect sensor plug, which is, let me find it here, this one. There's our Hall effect sensor wires. One of these has got the tachometer signal. Anyway, that green tachometer signal actually tells the display up top how fast are you going by how many revolutions per second. It knows what the diameter of your wheel is. And you plug these two back together. Unknown connector. I have no idea what this theory pond connector does. It's on every bike. I've probed it. There's no voltages coming out of it. It must be an option select for like a remote alarm system. Speaking of the alarm system, there are two connectors for it. They're fed from the controller. There's red-black wires to power for the alarm. This black box down here. And these 3 selector pins are for the alarm system. One of them sends 5 volts high to the controller and turns the bike off. The other is some kind of a sensor that does various features with the controller. The alarm is very straightforward. It has a simple antenna that operates with a key fob. The alarm speaker itself connects to it with this orange wire. And this thing is freaking loud. If you ever want to quiet it, you can just cover it up with a couple strips of electrical tape to kind of silence it. The alarm is good for 36 to 64 volts. It's generic in the Chinese industry. For that matter, the controller is too. On some of the bikes, the controller just sits in there in a plastic bucket of molded plastic. On some of them, they're actually bolted to the frame. So that's pretty much it for the wiring harness. Everything else you see is what you get. And as always, if you have any questions, you can write me your email. Email me at mechanerd@gmail.com or follow up on the Google videos and I'll reply accordingly. And as always, keep the shiny side up. Thank you for watching.